Amber stood frozen in front of the slightly ajar living room door, her eyes drawn to something glinting on the carpeted floor. A delicate gold bracelet, unfamiliar and out of place, lay discarded on the expensive rug. She frowned. The bracelet wasn't hers, and it certainly didn't belong to Michael, her husband, who had just informed her he'd be away on a business trip for a few days. But what unsettled her more was that she had cleaned this very room earlier in the day, and it hadn't been there then. Instinct told Amber something was amiss. The house was perpetually shrouded in a deathly quiet. Whenever Michael was absent, an oppressive silence that enveloped her like a heavy blanket. Yet now it seemed as if that stillness had been breached by an unseen presence, something or someone lurking just beyond her perception. "Is anyone here?" she called out, her voice slicing through the silence in an attempt to shatter the suffocating quiet. No response came, only the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, distant and monotonous, stretching time to an unbearable thinness. Amber bent down and picked up the bracelet clinking softly. Her fingers brushed against the cool metal, sending a chill racing down her spine. Then suddenly she heard it, a faint sound. It wasn't emanating from the living room, but from the hallway behind her. Footsteps soft yet deliberate, as if someone were attempting to move without detection. Her heart pounded against her ribcage, breath catching in her throat. Someone was in the house. But how? She had locked all the doors after Michael left. Amber spun around, her gaze darting toward the hallway, but it was empty. A cold draft slipped through the partially open window, coaxing the curtains into a languid dance. She attempted to reassure herself that it was merely the house's loneliness playing tricks on her mind. Yet from the shadowed corner of the hallway, a voice emerged, low, smooth, and tinged with a subtle mockery. "Looking for something?" it asked. Amber spun around, her heart nearly halting at the sight of Ryan Michael's son, leaning casually against the doorway, clad in a black t-shirt and dark jeans, his piercing gaze fixed intently on her. With an intensity that suggested he had been watching her for some time, Ryan stood there, and she gasped, her voice hoarse with shock. "When did you get here?" Ryan's lips curved into a faint sardonic smile, one that made it impossible for her to read his thoughts. "Yesterday. Didn't Michael tell you?" Amber swallowed hard. No, Michael hadn't mentioned that Ryan would be coming home. The unexpected appearance of her stepson, coupled with the mysterious bracelet and the charged atmosphere in the house, made her feel as though she had stumbled into a narrative she didn't fully comprehend. This bracelet, which she struggled to hold steady as she raised it for him to see, prompted her to ask, "Is it yours?" Ryan glanced at the bracelet, his eyes darkening momentarily before he let out a quiet chuckle. "No, but it looks like you've stumbled onto something interesting, haven't you?" Amber felt the urge to press him further, to unravel the threads of whatever was unfolding, but the cold, enigmatic look in Ryan's eyes rendered her speechless. In that moment, she realized something undeniable lingered in the air. This house, once her sanctuary, no longer exuded safety. Amber tightened her grip on the bracelet as she made her way back to her bedroom. Ryan had already vanished toward the staircase, leaving her to wrestle with her breath while her mind spiraled in turmoil. This house, adorned with pristine white walls and dazzling crystal chandeliers, could not mask the memories she had fought so hard to bury. Amber had not always been the woman she was now. Before meeting Michael, she had been entirely different, strong, driven and resolutely self-sufficient. She navigated the whirlwind of the media industry, juggling a relentless schedule filled with crucial meetings. Once, she held the belief that she could attain the trifecta of career, love, and a rich personal life. However, the conclusion of her first fervent romance shattered that illusion, leaving her in ruins. The end of that marriage stripped her not only of her faith in love, but also carved out a void that no achievement could ever satisfy. Michael entered her life during a period when Amber had all but surrendered to despair. Happiness enveloped him. He was affluent, composed, and extended to her an invitation to a realm she had long been deprived of, a promise of safety, of stability, of a life devoid of solitary struggles. Amber hadn't immediately succumbed to love for Michael, yet there was a soothing quality in his presence, akin to sinking into a well-known space where chaos could not intrude. Thus, she acquiesced, persuading herself that this serene, predictable life would suffice to mend the wounds she bore. However, Amber had not foreseen the solitude that accompanied Michael, for despite his outward demeanor, perfection had never been a man who prioritized his family. He buried himself in projects, long business trips, and endless meetings with clients. The house he had built wasn't a home. It was a grand stage where Amber played the role of the perfect wife for the world to see. Empty dinners, perfunctory conversations, and nights spent alone in a vast, silent bedroom made her feel less like a partner and more like an ornamental piece in Michael's curated life. And then Ryan arrived. Ryan was Michael's son from Haiti. A previous marriage a woman Amber had never encountered cast a long shadow over the house, an unspoken presence that lingered in the air. Michael seldom mentioned his ex-wife or their shared history, yet Amber sensed her influence in every corner, as if the spectre of her existence still haunted their lives. Ryan stood as the most vivid reminder of that past Michael wished to conceal. He had been raised in an environment rife with conflict and uncertainty, a reality that shaped his worldview, marked by skepticism and emotional distance. Amber remembered the first time she met Ryan. He was just 18, then newly emerged from the complexities of his upbringing. Graduated from high school, the young man with tousled black hair and piercing eyes had unsettled her from the very first moment she laid eyes on him. It wasn't due to any rudeness on his part, but rather the intensity of his gaze, as if she were an intruder, an outsider in his world. Years slipped by, and Ryan departed for college, leading Amber to believe she had finally escaped that unsettling stare. Yet now he had returned transformed not just in appearance, but in presence, no longer merely a young man, but something more profound. There was a quiet, enigmatic confidence about him, something Amber couldn't articulate, and that very confidence unsettled her. Her thoughts drifted back to the bracelet in her hand. Who did it belong to? Had Ryan brought it from somewhere, or was it tied to someone she didn't know? The questions churned in her mind, but more than anything, the object stirred an unsettling feeling within her, a sense that perhaps she didn't truly grasp what was unfolding in this house. Amber let herself fall onto the bed, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The house loomed like a sealed chamber, its secrets surfacing with a slow, relentless inevitability. Yet the most harrowing truth lay not in the shadows of Michael or Ryan, but within her own unraveling. Amber grappled with the unsettling awareness that she was losing her grip, not on the house, but on herself. The memory of Ryan's gaze, when he spoke of the bracelet, haunted her. It was not the look of a boy or a son, but one that was cold, confident, and defiantly challenging. The confusion and unease in her heart swelled an ever-growing tide she could not comprehend, stirred by Ryan's mere presence. Within her a tempest of emotions swirled, a sensation she had not dared to face since the inception of her marriage. Yet no matter how fervently she attempted to cast the question aside, it lingered, a relentless spectre. That evening the house once more fell into a heavy silence. Michael had yet to return, and as was customary, he had not bothered to call. Amber found herself in the living room, her gaze glued to the flickering television screen. though the film held no sway over her thoughts. The bracelet lay on the table before her, a mute testament to her turmoil. She needed answers, but from whom? Ryan or herself? Soft footsteps echoed behind her. Amber didn't need to turn to know it was Ryan. Perhaps the silence of the house amplified every small movement. Or maybe Ryan had become such an integral part of the heavy atmosphere that his presence was unmistakable. He stepped into the living room, holding a glass of water, and sat down on the sofa opposite her. The dim glow of the lamp cast shadows across his face, accentuating the sharp features of the young man. Amber found herself unable to sleep. His voice shattering the stillness, low and calm, yet tinged with an unsettling undercurrent. She startled slightly at his unexpected attempt to engage her. He had never initiated a conversation before. "No," she replied, striving to keep her voice steady. "What about you?" "It's late. Why aren't you resting?" Ryan shrugged slightly, placing his glass on the table. "Maybe it's this house. It's too quiet. It makes me uncomfortable." Amber couldn't help but agree. The silence in this house was indeed oppressive. It was a peaceful silence, the kind that hinted at a storm brewing just beneath the surface. She looked at Rand, searching his eyes for something, an explanation, a hint, anything that might help her grasp the strange discomfort swelling within her. Yet his gaze met hers unwaveringly, without hesitation or fear. "That bracelet," Ryan said suddenly, his eyes flicking toward the object on the table. "You're still holding on to it." Amber felt her heartbeat slow, the tension mounting in her chest as she struggled to maintain an air of calm. "I think it might belong to someone." "Are you sure you don't know anything about it?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up his glass, took a slow sip, and then placed it back down. A faint smirk crossed his face, one that made Amber feel as though she'd just stepped into a trap she couldn't see. "If I told you it wasn't mine, would you believe me?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge of provocation in it that Amber couldn't ignore. She opened her mouth to respond, but found herself at a loss for words. Silence enveloped them, stretching taut, as Amber found herself ensnared by Ryan's gaze, a gaze that commanded the very atmosphere around them. She yearned to shatter the stillness, to utter a word, but before she could gather her thoughts, Ryan rose and approached her. "I think," he said slowly, bending to retrieve the bracelet from the table. His fingers caressed the small object, which seemed to bear a significance far greater than its diminutive form. "You should be careful about the things you choose to hold on to, Amber. Sometimes the smallest things can change everything." Everything, his words sliced through the air, leaving Amber frozen in her seat, her heart racing in her chest. Ryan walked away, his silhouette fading into the hallway, yet his words reverberated in her mind. She couldn't discern if he had been referring to the bracelet or something entirely different. The house fell back into silence, but this time it was not the oppressive quiet she had come to know. It was charged with a sense of anticipation, as if something had only just begun. Amber reached for the glass of wine rested on the table as she took a large sip. Yet the burning liquid did little to quell the unease gnawing at her. For the first time she questioned whether she was truly in control of the situation or if she had already been ensnared in Ryan's game. Amber found sleep elusive. The bracelet, Ryan's piercing gaze, and the veiled words he had spoken replayed in her mind like an endless melody. She sat upright in bed, the pale moonlight filtering through the curtains, casting soft ghostly shadows across the room. The unease within her swelled as, though the house itself harbored secrets she wasn't yet prepared to unveil, she endeavored to reassure herself that all was well, that Ryan's presence posed no danger. Yet deep within she sensed a shift, not only within him, but within herself as well. As she descended the stairs, Amber observed that the living room lights remained aglow. She halted midway down the staircase, casting her gaze toward the sofa where Ryan sat, a glass of wine cradled in his hand, lost in thought. In that instant, he no longer seemed the cold, detached young man she had known. To see him was to witness a soul weighed down by invisible anguish, grappling with a conflict she had never before encountered. Amber felt an unfamiliar sensation awaken within her, an emotion that defied reason, yet intensified with each fleeting moment. A magnetic pull she could not resist, no matter how desperately she wished to. Sleep eluded her as she broke the silence of the night with a gentle inquiry, her voice trembling. Ryan turned his head, his gaze assessing her, as if measuring her essence, pondering her unspoken thoughts. "What about you?" he responded, his tone laced with curiosity. With a tone low and deliberate, laced with a faint challenge, something kept her awake. Amber stepped further down, moving slowly toward the sofa, careful to maintain a measured distance between them. "Maybe it's the silence," she said, attempting to sound casual, though her voice betrayed the tension rising within her. "This house always makes me feel alone." Ryan let out a dry chuckle, a sound layered with meaning she couldn't quite decipher. Alone. "You have no reason to feel alone. You have everything: money, status, a perfect husband. Everyone out there I would kill to have a life like yours." Amber frowned, sensing the bite in his words, but also an unsettling truth. "Do you really think everything is perfect?" she asked, meeting his gaze head-on. "You don't know anything, Ryan. This life, it's not what you think." Ryan stood, setting his glass on the table before walking toward her. His expression grew serious, his eyes darkening as though he were searching her soul for answers. "Then tell me, Amber, what makes you so unhappy? Is it Michael or is it you?" His question sliced through her like a knife, a blade revealing the thoughts and emotions she had fought to conceal. She turned her face away, reluctant to engage. Bond, however, was not so easily deterred. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to mere inches. "Have you ever wondered," he continued, his voice lowering to a whisper that sent shivers down her spine, "what it is you're truly seeking?" Amber remained silent, unable to respond. The air around them felt dense, suffocating, as if the outside world had vanished, leaving only the two of them in this charged moment. Ensnared in a tumult of feelings, neither could escape the undeniable truth. Her heart raced, breath quickening, and as she lifted her gaze, their eyes locked. His were intense, penetrating, and laced with danger. Ryan leaned in, mere inches separating them. "You know what's happening here, don't you?" he murmured, his voice, a chilling breeze against her ear. "We both know." Amber took a step back, but her foot collided with the edge of the coffee table, halting her retreat. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can't." He interrupted, his eyes ablaze. "Or you." His words struck her like a thunderclap, leaving her breathless. Amber felt as though she stood at the edge of a cliff, one misstep away from a plunge that would shatter everything. Yet instead of fear, she experienced an inexplicable rush, a forbidden thrill she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, if ever. And then, before she could stop herself, Ryan reached out and cupped her face, his touch gentle yet firm. The warmth of his hand spread through her body, washing away every shred of logic. Restraint was a distant memory, as Amber found herself lost in the moment. She couldn't recall who initiated the kiss, but in an instant, their lips collided with a fierce intensity, raw and electric, charged with emotions they had both kept at bay for far too long. The world around them faded away. All that existed was Ryan, his breath, his warmth, the way he seemed to awaken something deep within her that she hadn't even known was absent. Yet, as the kiss drew to a close and their lips reluctantly parted, an unspoken understanding settled between them. There was no turning back. They had crossed an irrevocable line. Amber took a step back, her hand trembling slightly. Covering her mouth as if to erase the evidence of what had just transpired, she whispered, "We shouldn't have done that," though her voice lacked the conviction she had hoped for. Ryan remained silent, his gaze fixed on her, silently conveying that this was far from over. Amber turned and walked away, yet she could still feel his eyes on her, sending shivers down her spine. In that moment, she understood that nothing in this house would ever be the same again. Amber hurried out of the living room, her heart racing. Breath quickened. Her chest felt as though it might burst. She dared not glance back nor meet Ryan's gaze once more. Her legs propelled her toward the bedroom, where the heavy door shut with a resolute click. Leaning against it, her trembling hands concealed her flushed face, the sensation of his lips still haunting her. The taste of their forbidden kiss clung to her unyielding. The awareness of having crossed a line was akin to plummeting into an abyss. She approached the mirror, gazing at the woman reflected back at her. That woman was no longer the Amber she once knew. Her eyes were clouded, filled with panic and guilt. Screaming to be acknowledged, yet buried deep within those emotions was something small but undeniable, a flicker of exhilaration, a feeling she refused to admit to herself. Amber shook her head, trying to dispel the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind, but it was futile. Ryan had imprinted himself onto her consciousness, and no matter how much she wanted to escape it, she couldn't erase the moment. The next morning, Amber woke in a daze. She glanced out the window as the bright morning sun filtered through the curtains, making her squint. The world outside seemed unchanged, as if nothing had happened, but inside this house, everything was different. She could feel it as soon as she stepped out of her room. The air seemed heavier, each footstep echoing ominously in the tense silence. Ryan was already in the kitchen, wearing a simple t-shirt and sipping his coffee, his eyes fixed on his phone. But as Amber entered, he looked up and their eyes met. Neither of them spoke. The moment lingered, stretching out in a way that made time feel suspended. Amber's cheeks flushed, and she swiftly averted her gaze, feigning the act of pouring herself a glass of water to escape his scrutiny. "Did you sleep well?" Ryan's voice shattered the stillness, calm and measured, yet it sent an unsettling chill through her. Amber tensed, but remained turned away. "I did," she managed, striving for an even tone. "What about you?" Ryan hesitated, his silence palpable before rising to carry his empty coffee cup to the sink, the space between them diminishing with each passing second. With each step he took, Amber felt her nerves tighten, every second stretching into an eternity. He stopped directly behind her, his breath warm against the back of her neck, freezing her in place. "I think," Ryan said softly, his voice almost a whisper, "we both know this won't stop here." Amber spun around, her eyes wide with alarm. "Ryan, no, this was a mistake. It won't happen again." Her voice trembled, yet she tried to inject firmness into her words, hoping to mask her unease. Ryan stared at her, his gaze unwavering. "A mistake." He echoed his lips, curling into a faint knowing smile. "If it was a mistake, then why didn't you push me away last night? Why didn't you run the moment it started?" Amber couldn't answer. She couldn't, because his words pierced straight through to the truth she was too afraid to face. But before she could process what he had said, Ryan stepped back, leaving the kitchen without another word. She stood there feeling adrift and overwhelmed, unable to move. That day, Amber stayed in her room, attempting to bury herself in workbooks, anything that could fill the void within her mind, yet nothing seemed to alleviate the weight of Ryan's image that lingered in her thoughts. His eyes, his voice, the memory of their kiss echoing endlessly. Amber came to understand that she was not merely confined within the walls of this house, she was ensnared within her own being. A few days later, when Michael returned, the atmosphere of the house transformed instantly. The unsettling silence gave way to a facade of normalcy, as Michael and Ryan engaged in easy conversation, reminiscent of a father and son reuniting after a long separation. Meanwhile, Amber compelled herself to maintain the pretense that nothing had shifted. But each time her gaze met Ryan's, the tension was palpable. The unspoken truth between them loomed heavy, a secret they both carried in silence. On Ryan's last night before leaving, Amber stood at her bedroom window, gazing out at the backyard. The dim glow of the garden lights illuminated Ryan's figure as he stood motionless in the cool night air, as though waiting for something or someone. Amber knew she shouldn't, but her feet moved on their own, taking her down the stairs. Each step was deliberate, leading her to him. "Amber Bug," Ryan said, his voice steady as she stopped a few steps away. "You." She could no longer deny it. Amber remained silent, the night's chill wrapping around her like a shroud, penetrating her very being. In that fleeting moment, clarity washed over her. Her life had shifted in ways she could hardly comprehend. The future lay before her, uncertain and daunting. Yet one truth stood resolute in her mind: the narrative woven between her and Ryan was far from finished. In fact, it had merely taken its first breath.